Charles's hand shook as he clutched the steering wheel, the hospital looming ahead. The phone call had come just an hour ago. Chloe was waking up after a month of sleepless nights spent by her bedside, surrounded by machines that kept her alive. His daughter was finally returning to him. He could hardly breathe, his heart racing as he parked and dashed through the hospital doors. The sharp scent of antiseptic assaulted him as he hurried down the hallway, his shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Nurses glanced at him, but he didn't care. All that mattered was Chloe. Her room was at the end of the hall, and when he pushed the door open, he froze. Her eyes were open. Tears welled in Charles's eyes as he stepped closer, his voice cracking. "Chloe, sweetheart, it's me. Daddy's here." But the look on her face stopped him cold. Her wide, panicked eyes locked onto his, and she shook her head weakly. "You can't be here," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. Charles's heart sank. "What?" "Chloe, it's me. I've been waiting for this moment for weeks." You can't be here," she repeated, her voice rising. Her hands gripped the sheets, knuckles white. "Please, you have to go." Confusion and hurt washed over him. He stepped closer, reaching for her hand, but she flinched away. "Chloe, what's wrong? Talk to me." Before she could answer, a soft voice interrupted. "Mr. Morgan." Charles turned to see a woman in a white coat. Dr. Sethi, according to her badge. She smiled gently, but her eyes were cautious. "I'm glad you made it. Chloe's recovery is nothing short of miraculous. We didn't expect her to wake up so soon." "Then why is she?" Charles gestured helplessly at Chloe, who was now staring at the ceiling, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "Why is she acting like this?" Dr. Sethi hesitated. It's not uncommon for patients to experience confusion or disorientation after waking from a coma. Her mind needs time to adjust. Charles nodded, but something felt off. Chloe's fear seemed too specific, too focused. He turned back to her, crouching beside the bed. "Chloe, please tell me what's wrong." She looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I'm in danger, Daddy. You have to leave now." Before Charles could respond, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Chloe's eyes darted to the door, her breath quickening. Charles followed her gaze just as a tall, slender man in a white coat entered. He was focused on his clipboard, but when he looked up and saw Chloe, he froze for a moment. No one moved. Then the man, Dr. Bennett, according to his badge, muttered something under his breath and hurried out of the room. Chloe let out a choked sob. "He's here. He's going to hurt me." Charles's stomach churned. "Who?" "Dr. Bennett." "Chloe, what are you talking about?" She shook her head, too overwhelmed to speak. Dr. Sethi stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Morgan, perhaps it's best to give Chloe some space. I'll stay with her while you—" "No," Charles interrupted, his voice sharp. "Something's wrong, and I'm not leaving until I figure out what it is." Dr. Sethi hesitated, then nodded. "I'll give you two some privacy, but if you need anything, just call." Once she was gone, Charles turned back to Chloe. "Sweetheart, you're safe now. I'm here, but you need to tell me what's going on." Chloe took a shaky breath. "I don't remember much about the accident. Just headlights, and then nothing. But I remember his voice. He came to my room, Daddy. He talked to me while I was asleep. He said he couldn't let me wake up." Charles's blood ran cold. "Who?" "Dr. Bennett." She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "He's the one who put me in the coma. He said it was the only way to keep me quiet." Charles's mind raced. None of this made sense, but Chloe's terror was real. He squeezed her hand. "I'll figure this out, I promise." He stepped into the hallway, his heart pounding. Dr. Bennett was nowhere in sight, but Charles wasn't about to let this go. He marched to the front desk, where a nurse was typing on a computer. "I need to know everything about Dr. Bennett," he said, his voice low but urgent. The nurse looked up, startled. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't share patient or staff information. My daughter just woke up from a coma, and she's terrified of him. Now tell me what you know." The nurse hesitated, then sighed. "Dr. Bennett's been here for years. He's a respected physician, but he's always been a bit of a loner. When your daughter was admitted, he insisted on being her primary doctor. He said he had a special interest in her case." Charles's jaw tightened. "Where is he now?" The nurse checked her computer. "He's supposed to be in surgery, but he's not." Charles interrupted. "I just saw him." The nurse frowned. "That's odd. Let me check again." She typed for a moment, then shook her head. "According to the system, he's in OR3. But if you saw him..." Charles didn't wait for her to finish. He turned and ran back to Chloe's room, his mind racing. When he burst through the door, his heart stopped. Dr. Bennett was there, standing over Chloe with a syringe in his hand. Chloe's eyes were wide with terror, her mouth covered by his other hand. "Get away from her," Charles roared, lunging forward. Dr. Bennett spun around, his face pale. "This isn't what it looks like," he stammered. "I was just..." Charles didn't let him finish. He grabbed the doctor's arm, twisting it until the syringe clattered to the floor. "Security," he shouted. "Someone call security." Within moments, the room was bustling with staff. Dr. Bennett was restrained, his protests ignored. Charles turned to Chloe, who was sobbing uncontrollably. "It's okay," he whispered, pulling her close. "You're safe now." Later, as the police escorted Dr. Bennett away, the truth emerged. He had been the other driver in the hit and run and was terrified that Chloe would recognize him. To silence her, he had exploited his position to keep her in a coma, administering drugs to ensure she never woke up. But Chloe's body had fought back, and now his crimes were laid bare.